after watching this, maybe the New York Jets want to get back to the negotiating table with their star defensive end, because I think this Jets pass rush is going to need him. Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast. I'm your host, Dave Helman, and week one officially in the books. All 32 teams have played. It was fun. It was surprising. There were twists. There were turns. There was one last beat down on Monday Night Football. We will get to that in a minute. Jam-packed show. Great show for y'all today. Going to catch up with our own NFL on Fox insider, Jay Glazer. Several key storylines coming out of week one, things to watch for week two, including Jordan Love's MCL injury, as well as Dak Prescott's contract negotiations, something we didn't really touch on Monday's show, but looking back at a strange deadline deal, very odd timing for Dak and the Cowboys. Get into that with Jay. Also got our own Fox Sports reporter Carmen Vitali on to talk about what we believe and what we don't believe coming out of week one. A lot of stuff happened. We're going to react to it, decide what we're buying, what we're selling, as far as what we learned about everybody in the first week of the season. We'll get to all that in a minute. But first, as I mentioned, there was one more game to play, and the San Francisco 49ers just roll on, I guess. They dominate the New York Jets 32-19 to wrap up this week one schedule. And it's nothing personal against the 49ers, but it seemed like there was reason for intrigue here with this team. We know about the sagas with Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams. Neither one of them really had a training camp while they held out for new contracts. Christian McCaffrey has a calf injury that bothers him throughout the summer. He is officially ruled out on Monday evening. So, you know, we've got rusty stars. We've got the best running back in football not playing. Maybe we're going to get some Monday night drama. Just stop, Dave. Stop talking. No, it was the 49ers just rolling over another team with all of the intrigue and drama of going over a speed bump in the bank parking lot. It did look like we might have something there in the first three drives. You know, this feisty Jets defense. Sauce Gardner's there. Quinnen Williams is putting pressure on up front. 49ers, 16 snaps on their first three drives, 48 yards, basically averaging 3 yards per snap. And you're sitting there thinking, maybe we got a defensive slugfest on our hands. Forget about it. They proceeded to reel off scoring drive after scoring drive after scoring drive in this game, just like they did last season. 8 scoring drives in a row before they finally call off the dogs and pull their starters. The Jets pulled Aaron Rodgers, who, yeah, that takes a backseat. Aaron Rodgers' first game back in a year. We'll get to that in a minute, but 49ers pulled their starters out here in the final 5-6 minutes of this game. The crazy thing, they didn't look all that good in this game. Like I said, it was a sluggish start, not great in the red zone, 2 out of 5 on trips down inside the 20. Busy night for Jake Moody, the second-year kicker, kicked 6 field goals. Yes, Jake Moody himself scored just 1 less point than the entire New York Jets team. Brock Purdy, wonderful final line, but you know, there were some missed opportunities there. Him and Brandon Aiyuk weren't on the same page, shockingly, after Aiyuk missed training camp. Ayuk's probably going to stay awake at night thinking about the missed touchdown he had on just a beautiful throw from Purdy. George Kittle had a drop as well. So this wasn't even as efficient as what we're used to with the 49ers. And they still rolled to the tune of 400 yards and 30 points. And like we said, they did it without Christian McCaffrey. It's Jordan Mason, the undrafted running back out of Georgia Tech, who rumbles for 147 yards. You may have heard this on the broadcast. 29 rushes, 147 yards. He hadn't touched the ball that many times since he was in high school, all the way back in 2016. Just doesn't seem to matter. Ironically, the 49ers making a great case for running backs being replaceable, while also demonstrating week in and week out just how valuable Christian McCaffrey is to this offense. It honestly reminded me of Kyle Shanahan's dad, Mike Shanahan, and the way that his teams just seem to have a new amazing running back every single week. Maybe you think back to names like Mike Anderson, Reuben Drones, Alfred Morris had a breakout season for Mike Shanahan in Washington back in 2012. Add Jordan Mason to the list. I don't know how many people knew the guy's name prior to Monday Night Kickoff, and he's the star of the show, averaged 5.2 yards per carry. Jets wanted nothing to do with him, getting second opportunity yards, bouncing off tacklers all over the place. Gets into the end zone for one touchdown as well. It's just amazing how efficient this 49ers offense is. And then over to the flip side, in the process, of course, they spoiled Aaron Rodgers' return to the field. Rodgers coming back from an Achilles tear he suffered on Monday Night Football this week last year. I will say, obviously a beatdown of a game, not one that Aaron Rodgers is going to remember super fondly, but there were moments here that should inspire optimism, in my opinion, if you're a New York Jets fan. Took the Jets a little bit of time to get going, but their third possession of the day, they go 12 plays, 70 yards. Rodgers dotting up Garrett Wilson, converting 3 third downs to his young receiver before they punch it into the end zone for their first quarter points. It took them 6 weeks to score in the first quarter last year. They do it on the third drive of the season. That in itself is an improvement. Later in the night, Rodgers throws his first touchdown as a New York Jet in the most fitting way possible. A free play offsides flag, bombs it away to Alan Lazard of all people. It came straight out of Lambeau Field. I'm dating myself. I don't think of myself as being that old, but I felt a wave of nostalgia watching Aaron Rodgers loft up a prayer on a free play and connecting for a touchdown. So something to build on if you're the New York Jets. It might not feel like it because you just went up against arguably the best team in the NFL, certainly one of the most impressive performances of week one. There's something to build on here. I will point this out. Maybe Jets general manager Joe Douglas and head coach Robert Saleh want to get on the phone with Hassan Reddick after this game. Jets pass rush looked a bit toothless against the 49ers. I think Brock Purdy had 2.5 seconds or more to throw on 72% of his dropbacks. The Jets just got 3 true pressures on him, pressured him within 2.5 seconds of the snap just 3 times. Remember, Hassan Reddick in the middle of the only ongoing holdout still in the NFL. After watching this, maybe the New York Jets want to get back to the negotiating table with their star defensive end, because I think this Jets pass rush is going to need him if they want to improve moving forward. Not the end of the world for New York. Hey, Aaron Rodgers got through the game healthy. He showed you glimpses of why you brought him here, but just another in a long line of nights that are all about the San Francisco 49ers, who apparently don't even need their stars to just roll over the opposition, and they do it again. All right, that's it for Monday Night Football. That's it for week one. Up next, we're going to check in on some key week 2 storylines with our guy, Jay Glazer.
Back for the first time in this 2024 season, fresh off of week 1. Thrilled to be joined by my good buddy, NFL on Fox insider, Jay Glazer. Jay, how'd the first Sunday go?
I brought the Camus. Week 1, a great week 1. I brought all the Camus.
I mean, I wish we were doing this at your place. Maybe we could break things down over a glass of wine. I would love that. I wanted to get with you after all of the craziness of week 1, sort of hit on some things that, I mean, in a busy week 1, maybe flew on under the radar, spin some things forward into week 2. I wanted to start with this. You've been doing this for a long time.
32 years.
You've broken a ton of news in the NFL. I was curious, have you ever seen a contract come as close up on the start of the season as Dak Prescott's did on Sunday morning?
No, it's kind of something that would have happened more in Ballers than in Fox NFL Sunday. Totally, and it's funny because people inside the Cowboys were like, can we just put this off maybe till Tuesday and like, let's just let everybody focus here on the game. But hey, obviously the Cowboys are different. There's a different, there's the business side of the Cowboys and then the football side of the Cowboys, and they merge together. But yeah, things like that normally don't happen. Normally you table it until after the football's over.
The Cowboys love to say deadlines make deals. And I mean, the start of the season is kind of a arbitrary deadline, I guess. Cause like you said, you could work on it after the fact, but it's so on brand for the Cowboys.
They didn't have a deadline. There were like different people saying there's a deadline. Neither one. I think both sides thought the other had a deadline, but that wasn't really the case.
Were you, I mean, clearly it's unusual, like you said, to have it come that close to the start of week one. Were you surprised when that news came across your phone? Or, I mean, there was so much smoke coming out of DFW.
I'd worked it the whole weekend. So no, I knew it was still going on. I knew that they were talking the day before. And actually, I was getting ready to go on Fox NFL Sunday to say, hey guys, despite people thinking that this has been tabled or there's a deadline, no, they were still negotiating the day before. So that was going to be my report and continuing to, talk that day if they weren't able to get it done. And obviously they got it done early that morning, right before we came on, about a half hour before we came on Fox NFL Sunday. But yeah, normally it's like, all right, let the player just think about that game, but also show you how different Dak is. He can compartmentalize both and go out, have the game that he had.
A very on-brand situation for the Cowboys and for Dak, just to push it right up to the last minute.
Listen, the NFL is the greatest reality show in the world, and the Cowboys embrace that better than anybody.
Okay, speaking of reality TV, that was the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, because your report about Brandon Aiyuk, again, just one of the crazier things I've heard when it comes to contract talk. Basically, to summarize,
that's what I do, baby. That's what I do.
To summarize it, I mean, so I'm just imagining, like you said, like a TV show. From the sounds of it, Kyle Shanahan has to run upstairs to stop his own front office from trading his all-pro receiver to another team. Like, I'm just imagining him like slamming John Lynch's phone down on the holder before he can execute the trade. Can you tell us a little bit more about that craziness that kept Brandon Aiyuk in San Francisco?
Well, first of all, it's a good thing that Kyle works out. That's number one. So you can get the, so yeah, what happened was basically they had cut it off. They made the decision to move on from Aiyuk. I think they all decided that. And then they were trading him to the Steelers that morning. So they were on the phone, front office with the 49ers, on the phone with the Steelers front office, and they were completing the trade. Well, Aiyuk happened to get to the facility early, and then he sat outside Kyle Shanahan's office. He was like waiting for Kyle. So all of a sudden, like he goes in, he's like, Kyle, I want to talk to you guys. Well, Kyle starts calling upstairs to John Lynch and Prague Barate, saying, hey, Aiyuk's here. He wants to talk about something, but they're not answering his call because they're on the phone with the Steelers trying to get this trade done, trying to finalize it. So he keeps calling and calling and calling, but he realized, like, I can't get in touch with these guys. And he knew that they were making this trade for the Steelers. That's when Kyle booked it upstairs and got up there and said, wait, hold on. Huh? And I think the phrase was, hey, give us a few minutes, is what they told Omar Khan, the general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, a few minutes turned into 2 hours, and Aiyuk and him. And you know what? There really wasn't, it was interesting because there wasn't a deal on the table at that point. And this part I didn't include in yesterday's report. By them talking, then the 49ers basically pulled that deal back out that had already been on the table. But they pulled the offer. So they ended up putting the offer back on the table saying, hey, you have until the end of practice. You can either get traded to the Steelers today, or you could take that deal that we had on the table. And Brandon Aiyuk said, this is where I want to be. But it was definitely wild. Nothing ever surprises me in this league. And I probably put out about 1 or 2% of what I'm told in the first place, because it's so, crazy. And when you broker information and you live in a world of trust, there's a lot of things that start off with Glaze. You can't tell anybody this, but it's just great equity to have. So nothing surprised me, but this one was probably a first of the guy getting traded. I remember breaking the Randy Moss getting traded to Minnesota story from New England. And I was waiting like 6, 7, 8 hours because they couldn't find Randy to tell him. And I was like, and that's right when I was breaking every little thing on Twitter, and like, oh my gosh, the Twitter war is going on. So that was a pretty wild one also.
it's so funny. I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, it's entertaining, but it's not a movie, you know. This stuff has a little more like organization to it, but that literally sounds like a scene.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine them filming that in the 49ers movie whenever
Right.
it comes
Yeah,
out. It's just
absolutely.
incredible stuff.
Thank you.
Not as fun as an update. Obviously, Jordan Love goes down with an MCL injury in the Friday night loss to Philadelphia. Sounds like the Packers dodged a little bit of a bullet just in terms of this not being a
Big one.
season-ending injury. But I was curious just for a little more information about what the hope is for Jordan Love and what the Packers are going to do at quarterback here while he's out.
I guess if you can, rank knee injuries, this is be as positive news as if you can get. When it first happened, obviously everybody was really holding their breath, but his ACL is intact, and that's the big thing. Then the MCL wasn't a complete tear; it was like a grade 1 or 2, which is a sprain, slight, and after that, it's about a 2 to 4 week injury, but it also depends on how much pain he could deal with, and like his mobility with that. The other thing too is the Packers are conservative. Matt LaFleur is conservative protecting his players, so it's a 2 to 4 week injury. He's going to make sure that he is fully able to protect himself before he puts himself back out there. So yeah, it was they definitely dodged a huge bullet there.
I guess from the sounds of it, it's Malik Willis until it's not. I've seen enough
And
backup
Sean Clifford
quarterback.
now.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of too strange or stranger than fiction, I should say. One of the more surreal things I've seen heading into an NFL game day, that would be Tyreek Hill in handcuffs before the Dolphins home game against the Jags. And obviously, it had a happy ending. He had a wonderful game. He helped the Dolphins come back from a deficit. But can you give us any more about this situation and I guess what happened here with Tyreek and the Miami police?
Actually, I talked to Calais Campbell, who was former Walter Payton Man of the Year award winner,
Right.
Who is the nicest dude in the NFL. He saw it go down. He walked over to try and defuse it, and they cuffed Calais also. And first of all, I don't know where you get handcuffs big enough to cuff Calais Campbell, but they cuffed the nicest human in the league who was literally trying to go over and defuse it. So one of the officers has already been put on administrative leave. They are doing an investigation. I like that Tyreek has said, hey, I want to be a cop, and I'm trying to use this to bring everybody together. But obviously, look, I can't talk on investigation. I don't know where that is.
Right.
But from what Calais told me, he saw Tyreek locked up for about 20 minutes by Calais' account. It was unfortunate that any of that goes down. I think I'm not there. I did talk to Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, who was really upset about it at that point. It looked like they wanted to take further action. Tyreek now is saying, hey, let's just kind of use it to bring everybody together. But yeah, that's that. Look, if I went to you and I said, brought up Ballers earlier, if we wrote that in a script of Ballers, everybody there on the set, technically, we're like, nah, guys, that doesn't really happen in real life. So let's not put that in.
That's exactly what I was trying to say earlier of like that's a situation where I'd be like, guys, come on. Like the NFL's not actually that dramatic,
Right.
but here in week
Not
one,
the NFL, but it's apparently that one officer was.
you can never rule out what happens in Miami, I guess. I'm just glad it had a relatively happy resolution. I guess
And a safe resolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to hit on with
Campbell, I mean, come on, man. The Calais Campbell is like, I mean, a little spatial awareness there, officer.
Preferably. One last thing I wanted to hit on with you, Jay, before we get out of here, and that's, hey, it's a great story. Justin Fields gets a last-minute start in his first week with the Steelers. They get the win in Atlanta. Obviously, though, Russell Wilson took it right up until Sunday morning. He did a workout on the field before the game. Do you have anything about where that stands or what the Steelers might do moving forward into week 2?
Yeah, I talked to Mike Tomlin about it. He's not sure yet because he just wants to see where Russell Wilson's calf is. I think he looks at it and go, man, redemption. I know he loves redemption games. So you could look at something like that, but he's not able to make the decision yet until he sees where, Russell's calf is. That calf it's tricky. I've torn my right calf one point, and just when you think you're through it, it just grabs again, and there's no rhyme or reasons half the time. But what I did like from Justin Fields, Justin Fields, he fumbled early. He had some of these, it's almost like he has this anxiety which he saw in preseason. He had it early in the game, but then he seemed to work it out, which is what I think Pittsburgh was hoping to see. And Pittsburgh does. They have a lot of love for Justin Fields. They think they got something in the future there.
I mean, we talked about it on yesterday's show. That's how you draw the blueprint up. I mean, the Steelers can
That's
win
a Steelers
football
win right
games.
there. Yeah.
Oh,
That's a Steelers, no doubt.
The Steelers win.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm
That
excited.
was a Mike
to see
Tomlin
where it
win if
goes.
there ever was one. Yeah.
He's gonna hang that one in his man cave somewhere. Like that's gonna have a special place in his heart, if I had to guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jay, it's always fun.
Even my dog agreed with you there. Hear that?
You get a little cameo. I love it. We love it. Jay, we love chatting with you, man. So much wild stuff to get to, and it's only week 1. I'm looking forward to catching up with you every week of the season. Thanks as always, man.
Appreciate you, brother. L'chaim.
With that, we can finally begin spinning things forward to week 2. Life moves fast in the NFL. We'll get back into the swing of the schedule. Let's start focusing on what's ahead. And to do that, I'm going to bring in a familiar face, regular guest on the show, our own Fox Sports reporter, Carmen Vitali, who was on hand for the Bears season opener against the Tennessee Titans. Carm, how you doing?
I'm good. It's so Chicago. And I've had a great time just enjoying Chicago in all its facets.
You thought you were going to get a high flying offensive showcase and you just got more Bears football.
But to be fair, I didn't think I was going to get a high flying offensive showcase right away. We can get into that later.
All right. I was going to say, all right, let's not give the segment away, but what I want to do here, we're moving on to week 2. We're assessing what we've learned and applying it to what's to come. But we do this every year. The cliche that you hear in the NFL every season is week 1 is a liar. Not everything that happened in this first round of games is going to bear out over the course of a 17-game schedule. Some teams that looked really good are in fact not. And some teams that looked absolutely hopeless are going to be fine. It's just the way this goes. So I wanted to play a game with you, Carm, in the spirit of week 1 being a liar. We're going to call this legit or lie. And we're basically going to try to parse out if the things we saw in week 1 are things we can expect to hold up, or if we're calling BS and saying, no, that's not going to be the case. So, as you just alluded to, you were there at Soldier Field for the Bears 24-17 win against the Tennessee Titans. Not the debut that a lot were expecting for Caleb Williams, to put it mildly, I'll say. But I want to ask you, was week 1 Caleb Williams' worst start of this season? Do you think that is legit, or do you think it's a lie?
It's more towards legit than a lie. I don't think progress is linear. I know I've said that on this show before, so I can't guarantee that there's not going to be another bad game from Caleb Williams and this Chicago Bears offense. But I do think that this is going to be more of an outlier as you continue to go down the season, into the next couple of seasons. There's a lot of new on this Bears offense, and that's what showed. The units that kind of popped off it was the defense, and the defense has been together for the last 3 years underneath Matty Eberflus in this same scheme, and has returned a lot of its starters from last season. So that unit is just further along. We saw that all during training camp too. All of the practices that I was able to see, the defense won the day. And the fact that you have a defense that can carry you to wins despite less than 200 total yards on offense, that has to be encouraging for Matt Eberflus and the Chicago Bears, because while the offense figures it out, you have a defense that can still win you games.
We talked about this over the weekend after this game. And you could make the argument that even this game was a liar for the Chicago Bears. Not to say Caleb Williams was amazing, but Keenan Allen drops a potential touchdown pass in this game. Probably makes you feel, I'm not going to say a lot better, but at least slightly better about what Caleb Williams did in week 1. I'm going to say this is a liar. I think we're going to look back at this, not that the Tennessee Titans are some sort of juggernaut, but I do think this team was well positioned to make life difficult on a rookie quarterback, whether you talk about the pressure that their front was able to create, covering on the back end. I mean, what's going to make Caleb Williams successful right away is extending plays, holding the ball, and finding busts downfield or finding throwing windows that weren't there. It's not the way you want a veteran quarterback to play, but I kind of feel like a guy like Caleb Williams is kind of going to have to fake it till he makes it. And I think this was a uniquely bad matchup for week 1. So I'm not trying to say that he's going to start lighting the world on fire right away, but I don't think he will play worse than what we saw in this game, I guess, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's a low bar to clear, right? He was 14 of 29 for 93 total yards passing. And what I talked to some of the Bears offensive linemen in the locker room after the game, and that Tennessee defensive front was just as you said. I think it's going to be a really good unit this year. They have Tavondre Sweat now, who is just an absolutely massive dude. And he hasn't even put it all together yet because he's so young. He's just relying on brute strength, and he can do that alongside a myriad other characters like Harold Landry and Jeffrey Simmons, who are well known for how good they are up front. So I think that was absolutely a challenge for the Bears offensive line, but I don't think that they did poorly either. I think they were probably about average when it comes to run blocking, pass blocking, all that kind of stuff. But you mentioned it. I mean, that touchdown pass to Keenan Allen, potential touchdown pass. I mean, Caleb just had a little too much air underneath it. He was a little too excited. Keenan just wasn't quite in position for that run. But what I love to see is that anticipation from Caleb Williams. And if you looked at actually that very first series where they had it faced with a 3rd and 3, Caleb Williams rolls out to his left and he fires downfield for DJ Moore to a spot, though. DJ Moore was not there yet. And he was like, it was so close. And I feel like once these guys have more reps together, those types of plays are going to start clicking. But the fact that Caleb Williams can go on the run and still anticipate throwing windows, not just see throwing lanes, but anticipate throwing lanes, that is really encouraging to me. And I just think that you just need more time together. These guys need to know how Caleb works. Caleb needs to understand how they work. Everything along the offensive line as well. I mean, they were rotating that right guard spot between Nate Davis and Ryan Bates. And that's not something that you ideally want to do on an offensive line. You want continuity as much as possible, especially for a unit that's supposed to have it. So I do think that there are some things that are still being worked out, figured out, and they just need more time. There's no substitute for reps. But again, I go back to the fact that the defense created turnovers, they created pressure, and they won you this game alongside special teams. So if you can eke out wins without scoring an offensive touchdown, I mean, that bodes well for down the line.
You want to know what's ironic is that Caleb is going to play much better games than this that the Bears lose. And then we'll get to have a really fun conversation of like, well, would you rather he throw for 93 and look like he's struggling in a win, or would you rather have him go off in a losing effort? It's going to be very fun. We're going to be grappling with what fair expectations are for Caleb and the Bears all season long, but sure. I'm calling this a lie. I think Caleb Williams is going to be just fine. Let's keep it in the NFC North with the Bears' biggest rival, who, for very unfun reasons, you could argue had the worst week 1 of anybody in the league. Not only do they lose to the Eagles in Sao Paulo, Brazil, but Jordan Love hurts his MCL on basically the last play of the game. I think there was one more snap after his injury. But basically when this game was concluded, Jordan Love goes out. MCL sprain. They dodged a bullet enough that it looks like he's only going to miss a few weeks, maybe even less than that. Matt LaFleur's in Green Bay on Monday evening saying they're going to give him every opportunity to play on Sunday. I'm going to go ahead and say I think that's definitely a lie. But with this new development that Jordan Love could miss some time, a lot of people worrying that the Packers maybe aren't a playoff team anymore. Carm, do you think that's legit? Or do you think it's a lie?
I think it's a lie. I don't think they will miss the playoffs. Again, you talked about it, and the Packers are hoping to get Jordan Love back more on that 2 to 3 week scale, I think. I know that Matt LaFleur is saying that they're going to give him every opportunity to play. I think that's just for the opponent's sake. to make sure that you're having to prepare for multiple different scenarios because that makes it harder on opposing defenses. The fact that they're not bringing in anybody else, though, really solidifies it for me that they really are optimistic about Jordan Love's timetable. And I'm not going to glean a ton off of that game, given the playing surface. But if you look at that defense, which you were hoping you were going to be able to rely on this year, I said it all offseason that Green Bay Packers were going to go as far as the defense let them, because I'm not worried about the offense anymore. And we saw that before Jordan Love got hurt. This offense is still great. It added Josh Jacobs, who didn't really have his footing quite yet, quite literally didn't have his footing quite yet because of the playing surface in Brazil. But you look at a guy like Xavier McKinney, who the team acquired this offseason at a pretty hefty price tag, that pays off almost immediately. Second, third snap of the defense's game of the night, Xavier McKinney gets an interception. Like, this is exactly what you wanted from this defense now led by Jeff Hafley. It's a complete scheme change for the Green Bay Packers. They are now a 4-3 base defense for the first time in 15 years. But it seems like there hasn't been much. The transition has been seamless. So I'm really hopeful that the defense can keep them afloat. And don't forget, I mean, this Eagles team, with the coordinator changes they made, this is supposed to be one of the best teams in the conference. Not just, this is who Green Bay is going to be going up against later in the season to make it down the line through the playoffs. So if you did this well against an Eagles team when your quarterback goes down and conditions are less than ideal, I'm not worried about the Green Bay Packers from here on out.
I am going to agree with you and say I think this is a lie. I don't know how we can, now that we know Jordan Love will be back at some point relatively soon, how can we freak out too much when just last year, the reason why the Packers are a hot team heading into this season is because they dug out of a 3-6 hole last year. Jordan Love averages 270 passing yards, 18 touchdowns to 1 pick, basically over the second half of the season to get them into the playoffs. So I'm not worried about them potentially digging out of a hole. But Carm, can I point this out to you? It all sounds well and good when you're rallying the troops and circling the wagons, and Malik Willis and Sean Clifford are going to be the guys. That all sounds really good. But I've seen this song and dance before when these backups get into games and it's like, oh my God, we need Jordan Love back immediately. I know it's been a little bit of time since Malik Willis started for the Tennessee Titans as a rookie. We all think very highly of what Matt LaFleur can do as a developer of talent. But last time we saw Malik Willis, he was second to last in the league in success rate among quarterbacks who played at least 100 snaps, and he was dead last in EPA per play. So, like, all I'm trying to say is that this can go sideways very quickly.
Yeah, notice I didn't talk about how I thought the backups were going to be able to keep this thing afloat. I talked about the defense keeping it afloat.
You did do that.
I'm very well aware of the fact that Malik Willis has not shown up until this point that he is a viable passer in this league. I do think that with the addition of Josh Jacobs and the fact that the Packers should have some more continuity on the offensive line, or have figured out their offensive line starters, because that was a big point of contention this offseason and this preseason. You have Jordan Morgan, who now got some snaps at right guard. The Packers were also rotating. I feel like we saw that a lot in week 1, where there were multiple teams like rotating their offensive line, which is just, it just seems like a cardinal sin to me. I don't know why that we keep doing these things, but that should settle in, and then you can get the ground game going. I think Malik Willis can be a factor in the run game, especially when you saw what Emmanuel Wilson was able to do in that game now that A.J. Dillon is hurt. So you have Josh Jacobs, you have Emmanuel Wilson, you have Malik Willis now that kind of factors into that. This just has to kind of turn into one of those run the damn ball type of offenses. But I think the Packers have the personnel to do it, especially when you include the tight ends and how much they can block and be a factor in creating mismatches, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not super optimistic about Malik Willis stepping in, especially when he doesn't really know this system. They just traded for him at the end of the preseason. But you need to kind of lean on the other phases of the ball if you're Green Bay to get you through the next couple of weeks. And hopefully it's only a couple of weeks.
which fortunately for the Packers, the next few weeks at least look manageable. Colts at Titans, Vikings. I'm not trying to say these are bad teams, but these are at least teams with, we'll call them uncertain quarterback positions. So winnable looking games coming up in the next few weeks, but it does get a lot tougher after that. So hopefully Jordan Love can hurry back, but I'm with you. I'm not freaking out about the Packers yet. I'm calling this a lie. Let's keep it pushing to maybe the team that disappointed me the most in week 1, just because I liked Bryce Young coming out of college. He's such a fun player. I wanted to believe that year 2 would be different. And then the Panthers went down to New Orleans, and Carm, they just looked like a JV team, if I can be honest with you. 47-10 is not supposed to be the score of an NFL game, but here we are feeling just as hopeless about the Carolina Panthers as we did in year 1 of the Bryce Young era. So I'll just put it to you bluntly. The Panthers looked like the worst team in the entire league. Is that legit, or do you think it's a lie?
No, I think that's unfortunately for Panthers fans legit. It just, there looked to be very, very minimal improvement when it came to just the offense in general. They just didn't generate anything. And Bryce Young did not look any more comfortable. I think the offensive line did get incrementally better, but it didn't seem to matter because Bryce Young still took 4 sacks. His time to throw ranked in the bottom 10 of quarterbacks in this so far this week in week 1. And when that happens, it puts way too much stress on an offensive line that again is still trying to figure it out, and an offense is still trying to figure out. Bryce Young got no run support either from the run game, from the ground game. It looked completely discombobulated. There was no sort of rhythm whatsoever. And the 2 turnovers from Bryce Young throwing 2 interceptions, I mean, it's putting everybody just in a bind, and the defense especially. The defense I think they only allowed 2 touchdowns in the first half. The rest were field goals, so they tried to mitigate the damage as much as possible. But when you put them behind the chains as much as they did, it's not going to go well for anybody. It looked like a complete disaster. I hope for Dave Canales' sake, for Bryce Young's sake, that it starts to look better. But this is not a Saints team that's supposed to be a juggernaut either. And I think that was the thing that really kind of was like, oh gosh, this wasn't supposed to be like a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. And it was.
The hits keep coming too. Word came down on Monday. Panthers defensive tackle Derek Brown, who Carolina basically decided to build their defense around. They traded Brian Burns away. They signed Derek Brown to a $100 million contract. He is now out for the season. So I think it's fair to call Derek Brown the best player on your team. Yeah. He plays 1 game for you in 2024. It feels really bleak. And for lack of a better term, just the eye test was not good for this team. Like, they still look slower, smaller, less capable of separating than the team they're playing against. Their defensive front got run all over by the Saints, and that was with Derek Brown, at least for part of that game. I'm sure it's not all going to be awful. The Panthers found a way to win even 2 games last year, but I feel confident after 1 game saying this is a team that's going to be picking top 3 in the draft. And that hurts me to say, because I was mildly optimistic that this would be a more fun team to watch this year.
I don't know that I really, really was, to be honest.
Fair. I just didn't want to let go of my Bryce Young draft priors. That's basically,
I know.
That's basically what it is.
So it's hard because you don't know how to differentiate. Would Bryce Young be better if he was drafted into a better situation? Would things be different if they had, a defense, or if they had any continuity at head coach, especially? I mean, when you're going through, where you're rotating systems, essentially, that just doesn't allow Bryce Young to settle into anything. And this run game just doesn't look, it's basically Tampa Bay's run game, and Tampa Bay's run game has ranked towards the bottom, if not dead last in EPA per play in the last couple of seasons, especially last season as well. So when you don't have those things that kind of make a quarterback comfortable or a quarterback can rely on, fall back on even, it puts all the pressure on Bryce Young to throw the football. And then especially when your defense, is still letting up points and you're playing from behind, you're forcing things. I mean, the Panthers were 1 for 10 on third down. It was just not good across the board. I don't know how else to say that. And I hope that they prove us wrong. I hope that they figure it out down the stretch, because if they don't, I think that they could be facing another coaching change, knowing the history of this franchise under David Tepper pretty soon.
You got to imagine David Tepper. I was thinking about this on Sunday, found out an hour before kickoff that the highest profile free agent quarterback, Dak Prescott, was off the market. Dak signs back in Dallas. So you're not going that route when this season's over. And then you watch this demolition job in the Superdome. I have a feeling he's not sleeping very well these last couple of nights. Thoughts and prayers to the Panthers fans in your life. All right, let's wrap this up with one more disappointing team. A team that annually disappointing at this point. And it's disappointing, except it's also not surprising. Carmen, I play Survivor just like everybody else. And on Sunday morning, I decided, you know what? I'm not putting my league in the hands of the Cincinnati Bengals in week 1. It's just not worth it. Sure enough, they go out, they lose to the New England Patriots 16-10. T. Higgins doesn't play. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow don't look like they have a great connection. Joe Burrow looked as uncomfortable and as not confident as I've seen him look maybe ever. And the Bengals scored 10 points. On one hand, it was as disconcerting a performance as we saw from a team people view as a contender. On the other hand, we got a lot of evidence that suggests the Bengals are slow starters. So are we concerned about the Bengals in 2024? Is that legit that we should be? Or do you think it's a lie and this is business as usual for a team that likes to hit the snooze button?
I tend to say it's a lie. And it's interesting to me when you talk about how uncomfortable Joe Burrow looked. He didn't look uncomfortable in the ways I was expecting him to feel uncomfortable coming off of an injury. He looked uncomfortable like he didn't know the offense, which was really interesting to me. And his connection with Jamar Chase, somehow they were still on that. Like, Jamar Chase caught all 6 of his targets. It's just Joe couldn't really find him as much as it felt like he wanted to. But don't forget, I mean, T. Higgins was not playing. And if you look back at last season and you look back at like quarterback wide receiver duo stats, I keep bringing this up because Joe Burrow and T. Higgins ranked in the top 10 in production in multiple production metrics between quarterback and wide receiver duos. So arguably, T. Higgins is one of the most important pieces of this offense. And Jamar Chase gets all of the shine because him and Joe are such good buddies. But that mattered this game. And then I was really confused because you saw some production from Zach Moss, their running back. And going into the game, I was like, I think that he's going to have to be really important and featured in this game as like they figure everything out, especially with the absences on offense. And they just didn't go to him as much as I was expecting. He was averaging almost 5 yards a carry. And I don't understand why you didn't lean on that a little bit more if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. You have a good offensive line. You made investments all along your offensive line this offseason. So why not trust it a little bit more? So I think that these are all things that are going to be remedied. But like you said, they're just kind of slow starters. We've seen that from the Bengals in years past. And hopefully Joe Burrow kind of looks more comfortable when he gets all of his guys back.
I'm going to call this a lie. I think at this point, the Bengals have built up enough equity of figuring it out that I'm just going to trust that to once again be the case. So I'm not, and if you watched this game, if you go back and look at it, I mean, Mike Gesicki drops a beautiful touchdown ball in the back of the end zone. That leads to a Bengals red zone fumble. Like, it's not easy. It's not hard to imagine a world where the Bengals sneak out of here with a win. Not worried about that. But in the macro, first of all, I'm annoyed that the Bengals can't figure out how to do this. They are now 1-5 in week 1 under Zach Taylor. And in September, during the Joe Burrow era, they're 6-8-1. They do not start seasons strong. And obviously it's not the end of the world. We've seen them put it together so many times, but it's like passing up a layup to pick out a much more difficult shot. Like, there won't be many easier games on the schedule than a home game against the New England Patriots in week 1 with a new quarterback situation and a new head coach. Just hit your layups, guys. That's all. And I'll say this as well. It makes me very interested for the future of the Bengals. Again, right now, I think they'll be fine. Jamar Chase will continue to play. He'll round himself into game shape. T. Higgins should be back eventually. But seeing stuff like this makes me wonder what the Bengals look like maybe when T. Higgins isn't there. Like, if he walks after this season, I mean, Joe looked so uncomfortable in this setup. And we've only seen Joe in college and in pro. We've only seen him with multiple badass options that can beat their man, that can get away, that can beat double coverage, that can beat single coverage. He's always had the utmost confidence in his guys to win. And what does it look like when they don't? Like, this kind of felt like a glimpse of what that could be. Hopefully that's an overreaction, but it is something I thought about.
I think that a lot of people thought, with the injury and everything, that this was kind of going to hurt. People know that the Bengals are probably not going to be able to keep everybody, right? And you think that T. Higgins is probably on his way out after this season. But yeah, this game and however long T. Higgins is out and how the Bengals do in that absence is probably the biggest vote of confidence to keep T. Higgins when you realize that so much rides on Joe Burrow having multiple options that the defense can't key in on. But what was really interesting to me is you mentioned how the Bengals have had slow starts, but this season in particular, this week 1 that we just saw, only 14 quarterbacks went over 200 yards passing. There's something in the water this week that there just wasn't good quarterback play. And I don't know what to attribute that to, like how it's so widespread. There was very few really jaw-dropping performances, if any. And I don't know. I don't like Joe Burrow caught whatever that was, but at the same time, you can't overreact too much because 17 other quarterbacks also didn't go over 200 yards passing.
Yeah, if you're not Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, I'll even throw in Matthew Stafford because he really balled in the second half of that game against the Lions. You're totally right. A very small handful of guys were really clicking to open this season. Maybe it's a byproduct of the way that teams have less of a preseason these days. And that's why maybe week 1 is a liar. That's why we say this. So, Carm, hopefully we parsed through to the truth of all of this, and we'll see how this ages as we get through the first portion of the schedule. As always, we appreciate the time so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
And with that, it is officially time to turn the page to week 2. What better way to do that than by refreshing the power rankings? We finally got new data. We finally played 1 round of games. So we'll call this the power rankings after week 1. Heading into week 2, this is where things stand. They look so nice up on the wall. As we like to do, we'll start down closer to the bottom, although I'm just going to avoid some of the disaster situations happening down at the bottom of the board. Let's start at number 25, a team that didn't get a lot of publicity, but I moved them up 1 spot from last week. That is the Los Angeles Chargers, who get a multiple possession win over the Las Vegas Raiders. J.K. Dobbins, we were hyped about him in the preseason. $135 and a tutty in his Charger debut. Jim Harbaugh gets off to a winning start. Now, this is fun. I don't know how much it means because, again, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders at 30 in our power rankings. I don't know how much this means, but I do just want to point out the LA Chargers now go to Carolina in week 2. Based on what we saw from the Panthers, a 2-0 start for the Chargers feels highly, highly possible to me. Who's got it better than them? Officially, like 24 teams do, but Nobody. Nice start to the Jim Harbaugh era here in LA. Another team, maybe I was harsh to the New Orleans Saints. I had them ranked way down at 28 to open the season. I heard a little bit of pushback. I heard you, Who Dat Nation. After a thoroughly dominant win, I felt like I didn't have a choice but to bump you up 7 spots from last week to number 21. You don't beat teams 47-10 in the NFL. At least you're not supposed to. Thoroughly dominant performance across the board. If you pull your starters in the fourth quarter, you had a great day. But let's see how it ages, because it was an impressive win. Saints fans have every right to be excited about it. You go to Dallas in week 2 now. So heck of a litmus test for the New Orleans Saints. I think as of Tuesday, the Cowboys are favored by 6.5 points at home. So Vegas does see the Cowboys as a heavy favorite. Maybe the Saints can really make some noise, though. I think like the league will be on notice if they can go to AT&T Stadium and get a win against the Cowboys. We'll see how it goes. Not everything is so happy for everybody. A few spots higher up, I had the Cleveland Browns as a top 10 team just based on the talent of their roster. Here in week 2, I've dropped them 6 spots all the way down to the exact middle of the pack. I said to myself, the talent is there. The defense is amazing. You've got enough skill talent to feel good about if your quarterback can play like his contract suggests he can. And one weekend, really at this point, almost 3 years in for Deshaun Watson, but 1 week into this season just doesn't seem to be the case. Yes, Deshaun Watson was pressured a lot by the Dallas Cowboys in that 33-17 loss. Yes, he was sacked 6 times, but having gone back and looked at it, there were plays there to be made by a franchise caliber quarterback in this game. Maybe not enough to win, but enough to make a good showing for yourself. And that is exactly what the Cleveland Browns did not do. A very deflating start to the season. All is not lost. Of course, there's time for them to bounce back. They get the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 teams with disappointing starts to this season. It's not too late, but a very deflating start for a team that I think should have high expectations. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, the team that thumped the Cleveland Browns, I'm a hard grader on the Cowboys for obvious reasons, but I've got to move them up 3 spots firmly into the top 10 after that showing. We're not going to move the goalposts on this show. The Cowboys were underdogs in Cleveland. Vegas and bettors saw them as a 2.5, 3.5 point underdog going up to Cleveland with rookies on their offensive line, with CeeDee Lamb not having much of a training camp, and they thumped the Browns. And if you think back to recent seasons, some big criticisms of the Cowboys were beating quality rosters, quality teams. Well, Cleveland made the playoffs last year despite starting 5 quarterbacks, so seems like a quality team to me, and they're usually nowhere near as good on the road. But they went up to Cleveland in front of the dog pound and really put this game away early in the third quarter. A very, very impressive win for the Cowboys. Great showing from their defense. Dak Prescott gets off to a nice start. They firmly deserve to be a top 10 team after starting the season that way. Like I said, all of a sudden, that week 2 game against the Saints, little juicier than a lot of people might have foreseen after what the Saints did in week 1. We'll see how that goes. Up at the top of the board, don't hate me, Lions fans. I didn't drop you because I wasn't impressed by your win against the LA Rams. I was very impressed. I talked about it on the Monday show. Taking the ball in overtime and just ramming the rock down the Rams' throats was as much fun as I had in week 1. Just watching David Montgomery do his thing and the Lions offensive line get that victory. It's just that the 49ers were more impressive. They were not having Christian McCaffrey with all the stuff they were dealing with to just thump the Jets the way they did, not need overtime. It was slightly more impressive, but I just want to make it clear. I am still very impressed by the Detroit Lions. I think Detroit and San Francisco, I hope they meet in the playoffs again. I'm getting way too far ahead of myself, but I thought this was the class of the NFC before the season, and week 1 backed up the way I felt about that. Lions and 49ers, good job, everybody. But somebody had to be number 2. All right. I think that wraps it up. Of course, the Chiefs will be number 1 until maybe even after they lose, after the lessons that we learned in 2023. So that is what the power rankings look like. After 1 week, we will be updating them all season long. And we will be back later this week as we dive into week 2. So many good matchups to get to, so much to look forward to. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not. Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your pods. I see our handle there at NFL on Fox Pod. If you want to follow us on any of the socials, we appreciate it. We will be with you to get ready for week 2 on Thursday. Looking forward to it. We're into the grind. We're shaking off the rust, just like the San Francisco 49ers. Let's go. We'll talk to y'all soon.